Hey everybody, it's Dan. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live out of a car for 50 years making movies? Our next guest, Jon Jost, has made more than 40 feature films, numerous shorts, and his work has been featured in numerous film festivals. And he's even gotten a retrospective at the MoMA. He was the first person to ever receive the John Cassavetes Independent Spirit Awards Lifetime Achievement Award. We're happy to have him on the program. So this is Jon Jost. Hey everybody, this is Dan.
And this is Ron.
So Jon has been on the show before. We're having him back to talk about some films of his, some older films of his that just recently got remastered, talk about the remastering process, what it was like going back to those movies after a long time, and whatever else comes up. So how you doing, Jon?
Okay. Tomorrow I go to Madrid, take a 9-hour bus ride to go to Madrid. And then I go to Cuba 4 or 5 days later, I forget.
And you're in Portugal now?
I'm in Portugal now, yeah.
And you were in Portugal for the premiere of these remasters, correct?
Let's see. No, only one of them, The Bed You Sleep In, was the one shown here. I hadn't seen a decent anything of it for, a mere 30 or 40 years. And it was pretty stunning. I was impressed by I literally had not seen it for decades, and to see it, the last time I saw it with a banged up print with French subtitles on it burned in, and so this was nice to see it. There were subtitles, but they weren't on the picture, they were underneath for the Portuguese people. Electronically done, and I was pretty taken aback by it. It was a pretty powerful film, and it was nice to see it on a big screen. The digital restoration was beautiful, and I was a little taken aback.
Yeah, because I remember The Bed You Sleep In was probably, I think it was the first movie of yours that I ever saw, because your old distributor had what I think I later found out were illegal DVD copies on the market. Yep. I remember I bought one of those, and I was just sort of like, why does he want everything to look kind of like slightly pukish green? And
it was very artistic choice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I thought it was like some kind of Lars von Trier Europa thing. Like you were just putting some kind of like weird moss filter.
Did you see the file I sent you?
Yeah. The new version, it looks like the colors actually make sense.
Yeah.
Colors and stuff. And so did you have a hand in the remaster? Did you supervise?
No, unfortunately I did not. I mean, the pictures are all basically what is that thing in your mouth?
Right.
I'm glad I'm not in the same room. It looked fine. The only problem with their thing is the titles have a pink hue to them, and they're not supposed to. And I've been having an argument with the lady at the archive. She said, "Oh," and I told her they're not supposed to be pink, and she said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Fuck, I made the goddamn titles. I supervised the print. They're arguing with me about whether I wanted pink titles." Anyway, so she said they will change it to be the white, gray on black.
Oh, otherwise, I didn't notice a pink hue on the version you sent us.
Well, on the projection, the original thing she sent me was very pink, and then the when I saw it projected, is just a tint of pink, but nevertheless, it shouldn't be pink at all. It's supposed to be white, medium gray, and depending on what the words are, and then against black. But otherwise, it all looked, I didn't have any quibbles with the lighting, etc. on it, so it looked pretty much like I would have done had they, they're all, what do you call it? They're professionals. So, what would I know about how my film should look?
And so did they contact you when they were starting the restoration, or
They told me they were going to do it. And my view is, of course, I should be there supervising it. But it was not, they're professionals. They'll do whatever. But it came out, I don't think there was anything. When I saw it projected, I don't think it was their thing, but I think the projector was a little too bright. So when I saw it projected here at the Cinemateca, everything they showed of mine was too bright. So I think it's just they just had their projector cranked up a little too bright. I can't control those things, It's like I make them, and once and I have friends, who die a million deaths when it isn't done the way they want it. And I'm a cynic, and I'm saying, I did my job, if you want to project it too bright, if I'm there, of course, I would go back and say, I did, this time I didn't, I just said, oh, fuck it, because it wasn't that much too bright.
Well, I mean, it's not covered in moss now at like 360p.
Right.
So that's something.
Well, it was shot in Oregon, so it should be covered with moss.
Yeah.
Everything in Oregon.
There was like an extra scoop.
At least in Western Oregon. Eastern Oregon is arid, but Western Oregon usually is too wet. I had friends who lived there. I lived there, but I had friends who lived on the coast who had moss between their toes. It's like it was so wet there, they get fungus in their feet.
Oh.
Wonderful place to live.
So I guess like I remember you telling me a bit about the release history of Bed You Sleep In, and there was some drama, there was some intrigue. Is there any of that you would like to share with the listeners?
About the release. Well, first off,
like kind of what led up to this.
Well, there wasn't really, to my recollection, that I keep in mind, I'm an old guy, but I don't think it was theatrically released in the States.
Oh.
All the Vermeers was theatrically released, but The Bed You Sleep In is showed around some places that were quasi, the kind of places if you had but it didn't have a real distributor. And it did get released in Europe. And I don't know whether you're referring to my problem with the erstwhile would-be producer or not.
I mean, that was definitely, I think, the intrigue part of it. But
okay, the intrigue is that the erstwhile producer, who on my copy of it does not have a credit anymore, I was able to delete all that stuff. I made my own file of the one that the archive gave me, and I deleted this because it wasn't true. He was not a producer. I was the producer. Anyway,
the guy that was selling like the bootleg DVDs, basically.
They weren't at the time. They were the DVDs made of the films. I can't remember the name of the now defunct company, justifiably so. No, there were 4 DVDs of 4 films of mine made by this company, and they were the worst DVDs I've ever seen. And I had no input on making them or whatever. And no, the erstwhile producer, whose name I will not mention here, he was my alleged good friend. Be careful of who your good friends are. After I said it wasn't functioning as a business, he went and surreptitiously got copyright in his corporation's name behind my back. And curiously, the Library of Congress, who you get the copyright from for movies, does not ask. He claimed he had a letter of assignment, which means a letter that I said, I'm giving my rights over to this person. Curiously, they don't ask to see the letter of assignment. So he claimed he had a letter of assignment, which he did not, and got copyrights on 4 of my films, Surefire, All the Vermeers, The Bed You Sleep In, and Frame Up, completely illegal. But then I went to a lawyer and said, well, this is all bullshit. And she said, well, it'll cost you a minimum of $50,000. And in light of the axiom, like possession is 9/10 of the law, since he already had it copyrighted, she said, I'd probably lose. Well, first, I didn't have $50,000 at all, not remotely. And the lawyers basically said, well, even if you spend the money to start it, you're probably going to lose because he already has it. So I dropped it at that. And fortunately, at least of the ones that I've gotten decent Vermeers and The Bed You Sleep In, I got copies of them. So I have my own copies, and I've been, to the little marginal degree possible, I've been selling them, and thus far have not gotten any grief for it.
And where can people buy these DVDs from you, John?
They are not DVDs. I don't do
Or
DVDs
Blu-ray.
anymore. I don't do Blu-rays anymore. I don't do physical. You can go to my VOD site, which is my name, Jon Jost. Plug in Jon Jost VOD, and you should pull up the my page of video on demand things, and one can get them there.
Okay.
I'm the world's worst businessman, so I don't advertise it or do anything. But of late, I've been
you're advertising it now.
Well, right, I'm advertising it now.
No.
Anyway,
this is like an infomercial for you, John. Like,
right.
like hitch away.
I'm certain I'll make a fortune. Actually, my VOD figures have been inching up a little bit, but so my annual income will turn from $1,000 to $2,000. Hey, that'll get me a long way.
So with the remasters, there's no planned like physical release with those, or they're just going straight onto VOD.
Well, the people, I haven't heard from the archive. The archive, they haven't suggested doing that through them. I don't think that's in their business. And no, there isn't any plan to do such things. Right now I have them on VOD. They probably wouldn't like it if they knew that I had them on VOD.
Oh.
But archives are strange little beasts, right?
Why wouldn't they like that?
Technically, I own the films, or those films I don't own. Technically, the copyright holder owns. And for them to show the film through their system, they have to get his okay, which thus far he has not declined any okay. But from their viewpoint, I probably shouldn't have what I have, right? And I shouldn't, or certainly I shouldn't sell it. But tough shit. I mean, they're my films, technically, legally. Those 4 I don't own, right? Those 4, in their viewpoint, I don't own. And archives, I told them the archive is in Amsterdam that has all my materials. And at some point I wrote to Simona, the woman who oversees my stuff. I said, as far as I'm concerned, you could take them all out in the back alley and burn them all up. I don't give a fuck. And I not so jokingly say, my films originally were here in Portugal, and then because of local political problems, the now dead head of the Cinemateca had promised me some screenings, and then political stuff came up over the kidnapping of my daughter, and suddenly he wouldn't give me the screening that he'd already promised me. And they had all my material here. And so I said, well, if you are so untrustworthy that you promised me a screening and then you take it away because of local politics, over the kidnapping of my daughter, then I don't want you to have them in your archive. So I got the Amsterdam people to agree to take them. So they were shipped to Amsterdam. And I jokingly say I carefully chose Amsterdam because I know in 50 years they'll all be underwater. So much for posterity.
I have kind of a weird physical media question to ask you.
Yes.
Okay, so here is a rental copy of your film Surefire.
Right, a terrible, terrible copy of Surefire.
Terrible copy of that movie.
That's
so
all those.
Why is your voided driver's license in here?
I have no idea.
I think it was in like you left a box with like
what year was that from? What
like
year's the license from?
I think like I got the tape from Brian, and then you left like a box of stuff at my apartment in Boston, and your driver's license was in there.
Yeah.
So I just put it in the tape because
I
didn't
know. What year
know
is the driver's license?
Let me take a look.
My current driver's license.
Thing. Let's see. It was issued 2012.
2012. Well, now I have a Washington license, but I think I accidentally ran my wallet through the washing machine. And here, you see that? Now.
Oh, damn.
Can you see what? So the plastic part detached from the front part detached from the back part. I assume because I think I washed my wallet went through a washer. But right now, I don't know if a cop would accept but I haven't driven for ages, and probably I won't drive again.
Well, if you need your old one, it's in upstate New York.
It's in upstate New. Well, I don't think I could drive on it. This one is good until, what does it say? I got it in 2019, so good to 2020. What does it say? 25. Another 3 years.
So a little bit of Scotch tape or a stapler.
Pardon?
A little bit of Scotch tape.
Scotch tape, some kind of glue,
here and there, and
whatever. I'm all set. Well, I just need to have a car.
I
haven't had a car for 3 years.
Why you left your license in like a cardboard box?
I have no idea, but perhaps because I'm old and I do things like that.
All right. Well, it's in the museum now.
It's in the museum.
Regular listeners know about the museum that's in the house. So,
do you have it up on a wall as part of the exhibit?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think there's like a customs form in here too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you must have sent a DVD abroad. There were like a bunch of random papers in the box. I just put them all at this VHS tape. So I guess the next thing I wanted to ask you is like with the bed you sleep in when we watched it, like I watched it for I think the third time yesterday, and Ron saw it for the first time. And a thing that was kind of going through my head was, number one, it seems to prefigure a lot of the later work that revolves around your daughter. Number two, I think that it seems more relevant now given the Me Too thing. Yep. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about kind of how it aged with those things over time when you watched it the other night.
Oh, well, I think it's one of my films that has, it doesn't have cell phones in it. Something like that. So outside of very superficial things like that, for me, it was the thing about the daughter, et cetera, was because at the time I made it, it was a very hot button topic about recovered memories and children going to psychologists or whatever they call them. And the psychologist sort of prompting them to remember things that weren't true.
So like you're talking about like the satanic panic kind of era?
Well, it wasn't satanic. It was about sexual abuse of children, and that the therapists or whatever they're called and children are very malleable. if they have somebody telling them to remember it, then they remember it. So this is a very hot button topic at the time I made the film. It was very, in the newspapers, in social discussion about children accusing people of blah, blah, blah. And then there was, I don't remember his name, there was a well-known writer at the time who wrote a whole book about recovered memory, challenging it, saying this is bullshit. And anyway, at the time, it was a very sensitive topic. And I deliberately made the film sort of around that as a kind of, what do you call it? A litmus test of how people respond. And, the way I made it, I remember dealing with the actors, they said, well, did he or didn't he do it? And I said, I don't know. And I don't want you to act it as if you know. I want you to make a neutral, I want you to act it so it's neutral. So there is no, the film never gives you any evidence short of the daughter's accusation. It does give you a vague hint, which fortunately is visible on the new restoration. When the kid calls and says, your daughter killed herself, there's another person in the image. It's indirect. So a person on the lower left-hand side who looks up to him,
Right.
totally out of, not in focus, whatever. And there's a hint that perhaps something is, being a setup. Now, when I made it, I kind of figured, well, 99% of women are going to say he did it. And I had no idea what percent of men would say, but the film doesn't tell you. And I hope I got the acting of the people such that they don't tell you through their acting. And it was for me like kind of an experimental litmus test of how the social atmosphere at the time would trigger people to, oh, of course he's guilty.
Right.
It's not there. Film doesn't tell you it's there. And, then when I showed it in public and I asked, because I do ask people, and my guesstimate was pretty correct, although a higher percentage of women than I thought questioned whether he did it. I mean, still most of them did, but I was surprised that there was a handful of women who didn't take the hook. And I was right about, 50% of men thought, yeah, he did it. And so for me at the time, this was a very hot button topic. And part of the film was for me to do an experiment, to say, okay, now that this is in the social fluid, how do people respond? Now, the thing for me is that film really wasn't about that, but it was about the collapse of social trust in America at the time. It was, and the consequences of what happens when you lose social trust. And so the family wasn't this particular family with their little behind the doors, whatever. It was more the family of America. What happens to us when we don't trust each other anymore? Well, we commit suicide. That's what happens.
Right, like it wouldn't be a Jon Jost movie if somebody didn't die at the end, right?
No, this is true. In this case, we have two dead
You really
people.
like killing people at the end of the movies.
Well, as I tell people, because it's a frequent comment, especially for people who've seen many of my films, I say, why is there always somebody dead at the end of your films? I say, because you can't talk about life if you don't talk about death.
But then it's confusing because some of the actors come back in the next movie. So are they dead or are they not dead?
Oh, well, I don't make zombie movies.
You should. Honestly,
I
you
make
make a
movies
pretty
where
good zombie.
they're
Like you got most of the stuff for a horror movie in most of these movies, right? You got like the slow kind of atmospheric approach to setting. You've got kind of deranged characters that are. I mean, I guess like Last Chance for a Slow Dance is like almost a horror movie.
Well, I'm not a fan of horror. I'm not a fan of any movies because I hardly ever see any movies. But horror movies have never been I was never attracted to seeing horror movies. I did see the Bergman horror movie. What was it called?
Night
Hour
Hour
of
of
the
Wolf.
Hour of the Wolf or Hour of the something.
Mm.
Is that what it called?
I think it's Hour of the Wolf. Yeah.
Yeah, Hour of the Wolf. It wasn't one of his better movies.
So I guess that kind of brings up like I think in terms of like the ambiguity of whether he did it or not, a lot of the ambiguity for me was coming from the fact that like Tom Blair, who plays the lead in the film, he always seems like he's up to something, right? Maybe that's just because I've been trained by the other two movies, because he's almost playing against type in this movie versus like
Right.
Surefire and Last Chance for a
Yeah,
Slow
okay.
Dance.
Yeah. No, I tried to paint him as a concerned, caring person. And I suppose, yeah, if you saw the other films, it would tilt your view of him, right? But hypothetically, most people haven't seen the other films. So basically you have a portrait of a guy who cares about his workers, who cares about this, cares about that. And you can detach that from the other two films. There's nothing inside the film that would suggest that he's a bad person.
Right.
And yet I knew that given the social atmosphere of the time, I knew that, he was, as soon as the accusation comes, he's guilty. Doesn't matter what. Now, curiously, I've had this, because of this film, for something that happened much later, I had people say, oh, he made that film, therefore he and his daughter Claudia, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, Jesus Christ, film people are nuts. That they would extrapolate, okay, in 93 he made this film that says this, and then 5 years later, oh, that tells you that he's
well, there was a conspiracy theory going around online that, I mean, there wasn't much substantiation, really any substantiation to it, but supposedly, because the other thing we were kind of like, did you ever see Twin Peaks or no?
I think I saw, was Twin Peaks a video?
It was like a TV
movie
show that David Lynch did.
Right. No, I saw some chapters of it, yes.
And it was kind of reminding us of that because, like, I guess spoiler for Twin Peaks for anyone who hasn't watched the whole thing, but you have all this emphasis on logging. You also have the kind of payoff at the end of Twin Peaks, or like I guess towards the middle, is that the father did in fact molest the dead woman who shows up in the pilot. I thought that was kind of interesting. I guess the other thing I was going to ask is like Tom Blair. So Tom Blair is like one of the most recognizable faces, and I would say like the first half of your work, I guess would be the way to put everything up to. And this is Bed You Sleep In is the last finished movie with him. Was it did he just not fit the vision for the later pictures, or was there were there like issues on set, or did he just want to retire?
I did not ask him again to be in a movie. And I doubt that he would have. After Surefire, we were not on speaking terms. My history with him is a little, first off, he's a very volatile person. I would not say. I fired him twice. We started 2 other movies where either we stopped. We did a movie in the early, when was it, the early 80s, that started in South Dakota, and he got his girlfriend to be in it. It was all improvised, and he and his girlfriend were breaking up. And then he got pissed off that when they were improvising, they were breaking up. And I said, well, I didn't tell you to do that. So, in less than a week, we said, let's just forget about this. Let's not make a movie.
So you didn't steal his girlfriend.
I didn't steal his girlfriend. I had nothing to do with it. It was just sort of like he was pissed off because he was breaking up with his girlfriend, and I'm filming, and when they were improvising, that's what they were doing. So what could I do? And then sometime later with Roxanne Rogers, who was in Slow Moves, we went to make a film in Montana. And after maybe a third of the film had been shot, she told me she was scared to be in the same room with him. So I said, oh, I guess we have to have a meeting. It turned out that some girlfriend from long ago who lived nearby, and they were having friction, and he was whatever, stressed out or whatever. Anyway, so Roxanne said, I'm scared to be in the same. So I had a meeting and I bring it up and his sunglasses go flying by me. And I said, you're fired, get out of here. And then with Surefire, the erstwhile producer, was in love with Last Chance and wanted to work with Tom. So I said, okay, call him up. You know, I assumed that Tom would say, fuck you. And then he didn't. And so instead, he said yes. So then we went to make Surefire, where Tom was sort of exacting revenge and he would not improvise. And the film I wanted to make is completely different than Surefire, because he refused to improvise, and the other actors who were essentially weaker than he was went along with him. So I said, okay, well, here's the scene I want. You guys go figure it out and I'll edit it. And, right, so it ended up more or less a scripted film, but scripted through them. Right? I didn't write it. You know, I said, here's what I want. They went off and then they basically scripted it and it became a totally different film, which is a film of a sequence of little theatrical set pieces, basically. And I wanted a very casual, something that my style was almost invisible. And instead, my style was amplified. And at the end of that film, I was not on speaking terms with anybody involved. And I didn't look at the footage for a year. And I made all the Vermeers first. And then I went back and rescued Surefire, which I don't regard Surefire as a good film. It's a very powerful film, but powerful and good are two different things. And and then after that, I can't remember how it happened, but came to make The Bed You Sleep In, and I assume I asked him after Surefire, and he said yes, and so we went ahead and did that. And then after that, I never asked him to be in another film. And after The Bed You Sleep In, I don't think we were, but then he got that he wouldn't talk to me, he doesn't correspond with me, he doesn't anything with me. And he retired from acting some time ago now. He was basically a theater actor, and he worked in the Bay Area. And the last I know of, he retired, as I say, some years ago, 10 years ago, more than that. And as the doorman at the back, the thing that the actors go through to get into the San Francisco Repertory Theater. And people who I know who occasionally see him say he's a cantankerous son of a bitch.
Well, but I mean, that's got to be
recently. I just sent him. I sent everybody in The Bed You Sleep In, including him, when it showed here, and I saw it in its beautiful state, and I hadn't seen it forever. I sent everybody, as I normally do, a thank you and whatever, and I included him, but he didn't respond. So.
And I mean, was some of that volatility what kind of attracted you to work with him in the first place? Because that seems like if you wanted somebody who wasn't a little bit volatile or out there,
I originally on Last Chance, I knew him because we both lived near Kalispell, Montana, and I have no idea. I don't have any idea how I originally met him. And we would smoke really bad dope and go have a beer and talk with each other. And the dope was my Montana homegrown, which was really lousy dope. He was the head of the theater department of some community college nearby. I never went and saw one of his performances, thank God. And we were just kind of friends. I honestly don't remember how I met him. I certainly didn't go to the college, say, who's the theater department? I know I didn't do that. So I don't remember remotely how I met him. But, we'd meet once in a while, smoke some dope and drink some beer and talk. And then when I decided to make Last Chance, I wrote him and said, how about, I'd never seen him act, thankfully, because I'm certain I would have hated his acting and whatever he did with the community theater, if he acted, don't even know if he acted. And I never seen him, never auditioned, never anything. He was just my friend, and I said, I want to do this film, and we had a little, way back at that time, obviously we had our correspondence by snail mail, and developed his character a bit to the degree that I do such things. And then he came and, we shot the film. And when he first saw the film, he didn't like it. Then his brother saw it and was blown away. And then Tom started liking it. And anyway, so I really don't understand it all. I just know he's a great actor under my direction. Well, I mean, because he hasn't, he'd had a little bit part in a Hollywood movie, which he hated. I mean, bit part like telephoto lens to see him at a long distance. And otherwise he's worked in theater. And I did see some of his theater work. He worked with a Japanese avant-garde director with a completely normal Japanese name, Fujiwara or something like that. And I saw him in a version of King Lear, where this guy had a theater something in the mountains in Japan. I know Tom went there for 4 or 5 years and got his training. And it was kind of like, of the time, a kind of commune thing where the guy gets you up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you got to do these exercises and blah, 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 and get your body really strong, which Tom did. And same thing, it was like, you can sleep with so-and-so and you can't sleep with, it was like a little dictator, the antithesis of my way of working. But recently, sometime in the last year or two, Ellen McLaughlin, who plays the wife in The Bed You Sleep In, told me that talking with Tom, one of the things he was most proud of was the courtesy of the training that he got with the Japanese guy at the end of the film, where he goes down and takes water in his hands and brings it up and puts it in his face. That he was able to do that courtesy of the training that he got, that he was physically strong enough to slowly come up and do the whole thing, which he never told me, of course. And that was one of the things he was most proud of in the movie, was that he was able to do that shot. And so anyway, I wish he would talk with me, but he doesn't. Look at that. A hand just came in and gave me a glass of wine. I thought it was a dog coming in. Thank you.
It is the dog.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Here's my iced tea.
I got some coffee.
Coffee, there you go.
Okay.
On the edge, drinking some late coffee.
Yeah.
Well, for you, it's relatively early in the day, yes?
Well, I mean, 4 p.m. is pretty late to be drinking coffee, I think. But
well, yes. When are you going to switch to something else?
At
5?
Dad. I like
Well, there's
living
the
on
weed.
coffee now.
Does the weed? Well, you don't drink the weed, I guess. So
You don't
Not
drink
yet.
weed? What's wrong with you?
yeah. Oh, wait a
Not living in
second.
the future.
Wait a second. I have a can of weed in my fridge.
You have a can of weed?
Yeah. Here, wait. I'll show you.
Is it liquid weed?
It is liquid weed.
Yeah, you can get like orange soda with weed.
I
in it now
see.
called, Orange Kush.
This is Levia cannabis infused seltzer, Janberry. Ease your mind and spirit. Ooh, this one's indica. Okay, I better not drink it now because I'll fall asleep. I'll be very relaxed, but I'll be too relaxed.
Right.
So Ron had a question for you about the movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So actually, it was, Dan brought up Twin Peaks because of the logging and all that. I was fascinated by the Sawmill. Like, I don't know if yeah, fascinated. I was trying to come up with the right word because at first it was like I was excited about the Sawmill. It's like no, it was very relaxing and soothing. But I was wondering, how did you get access to the Sawmill? Because you were all over that thing and above and below.
Well, back then, I don't know whether it would be possible anymore, but back then, Oregon was a very laid back place. And, I picked the town Toledo before I knew the mill was there. I had asked a friend who lives in Oregon and said, I'm looking for a mill town. And I kind of described what I was looking for. And he gave me a list of 5 places and I went and looked at them all. And they were all in relatively flat valley areas and they weren't what I wanted. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what I wanted, but the ones I went to was like, nah, that's not it. And then I remember not going, he didn't have Toledo in his list. And I remember driving to my friend, was it? No, this was she was the first time she was in my film. Some reason I was driving to Newport, Oregon, and I came over the crest of this hill and there's Toledo. And it was like instantaneous, like, that's it. And then and part of it was because it was hilly, so I could get those shots where you have the hills and you kind of lake kind of layers, and this was a very visual thing. And when I went into it, I didn't know that mill was there, and then I decided this is the town I'm going to shoot in. And I found the mill was right there, just off at the edge of it, and it was not a normal mill because they did work in very large scale. It was for industrial stuff. It wasn't 2x4s. It was to make big things for mining or bridges or, railroad trestles and things like that. And the whole part of the film of that business was getting tight because they couldn't cut down big old growth anymore was true. And, and I went and I didn't have to sign a piece of paper. They didn't make anybody go around with me. They didn't make me wear a hard hat. They just said, go shoot what you want, right? And I went into all these places, which by certainly other state standards would have been dangerous. And either they would have said, no, you can't do it because it's dangerous. Or if you're going to do it, you have to be tethered to our guy who will keep you. They just gave me, it was like just a carte blanche. Go shoot whatever you want.
That's funny because there's actually at one point in the movie, I think it might be outside the office, there's a sign that says hard hat. It's required hard hats, but hard hat, smart hat. Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
No, that's right. Towards the end, when he's getting the phone call about from the kid who tells him his daughter's committed suicide. I like there's another sign in there says the beatings will stop when you.
Oh yeah.
But that was just there, right? It was obviously a joke from their viewpoint, but that was not was set decoration. That was just the way it was in that office. Anyway, the mill, I have no idea what the film would have been if that mill hadn't been there and I didn't get this carte.
I mean, it probably would have been like Surefire, right? Because I don't remember
no
being a
idea.
mill in Surefire.
I just remember one of the major things about the mill is that, I was, needless, as you can see, I was somewhat fascinated by it. And I remember telling the sound guy, John Murphy, I remember saying, I want the sound of the mill. And so he went and spent a few days just recording sounds of the mill. And I said, in the whole film, I want the faint sound of the mill in the background. The mill or the pulp, also the pulp mill. And the only time it's not there is when it gets very loud when Tom goes and discovers his dead wife. And he opens the windows to get the gas out of the place. And then it goes silent. It's the only time in the movie where you don't actually hear the mill in the background. And I told Erling, the composer, he came up there to look around and get a sense of the place. I told him, I said, I want the music to come out of the sound of the mill. So sometimes you can hardly distinguish when music's starting to happen and the mill sounds. So the mill ended up being a super important part of the film,
Yeah.
which of course, because the way I work, I didn't know there was a mill near there. I didn't know it was that kind of mill. I didn't know I wanted to shoot in a mill town, so I must have known something. And then, and then it all just, then the mill became a major ingredient to a major character in the film.
Yeah.
Which originally, I had no such thing. I had no anything. I just knew I wanted to make a vague film about what was going on in America at the time. And I wanted to make it in Oregon, and Oregon is its major industry was, I don't know if it still is, timber.
Yeah.
And so it all just sort of one thing led to the next, and that's what the film came out of.
Okay. Yeah, because the mill has, with the sawing and everything, that's at least what, 20 minutes of the film if you add it all up?
I wouldn't be surprised.
That's a supporting
if it was
character.
more.
Or more.
I would say
I'm
30 to
underestimating.
40, right?
I have
Barely
well,
anything
not
happens
40.
for an hour.
Yeah. Well,
It's like-
basically in the film, by normal standards, nothing happens. Of course, a lot has happened, but
Mhm.
my I presume I've told you this before, but this is about constructing drama. That most Western dramas are constructed in effect like a chess game, where you have two lines of people, and one penetrates the other, and that's how we perceive drama. And I, not intellectually, but only after I made a number of films, that I realized what I'm doing. Do you know Go? And only after a long while did I realize, not consciously, but I'm constructing drama like a Go game. Now, in Go, if you do a really good Go game, the logic of what you're doing is completely invisible until you put in one piece and say, okay, game over, I'm gonna kill you. And I think I only became aware of this after, sometime during the Vietnam War or after the Vietnam War. I read a skinny little book comparing US military strategy in Vietnam, where the US was playing chess and they were playing Go. And the US was up, why are they behind our front lines?
Yeah.
It was a very simple, and maybe after that, I realized that's kind of how I make my dramatic structure. So like you look at The Bed You Sleep In, or most of my films, and you say, well, there's nothing in the normal narrative sense. There's nothing going on for an hour. And then the letter gets read, and suddenly all the little pieces that I've set up suddenly cohere and make some kind of sense and lead to the drama. And so I have lots of people, there's nothing going on, except my films do usually generate a pretty powerful emotional thing when they're all over. And it's true. Okay, for an hour, sort of meandering around and nothing's happening. And
well, there's symbolic pieces being set, right? Like we're getting the context of this guy's at the sawmill. The sawmill's not doing so hot. He has a nice moment with his wife, so we know that they didn't just always hate each other when they come to kind of a confrontation.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm kind of thinking like a lot of how I structure narrative kind of resembles Tetris. Like I'm just piling a giant stack of crap and then clearing lines afterwards, right? And so this is a little off topic, but we did an episode on Nicholas Ray a few months ago.
Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking, because I remember you mentioned you spent a fair amount of time with Nicholas Ray in the 80s.
Well, a month.
A month? Okay. Any specific memories or?
Well, I was never a Nicholas Ray fan, and I didn't even know I'd seen this. I'd seen in my childhood, I'd seen one of his films. What was it called?
Rebel Without a Cause?
No, I couldn't watch Rebel Without a Cause. I mean, I tried to watch it, and 3 times I just got bored with it and turned it off. The one I did see, later was called, oh fuck, cowboy movie in Montana.
The
Can't
Lusty
Go Home.
Man.
Huh?
The
The
Lusty
Lusty
Man.
Man, right. I did see that and I kind of liked that. And I had, when I was a kid, I saw one called Flying Tigers, which was about Air Force, World War II Air Force. But I was not a Nicholas Ray fan. But I stayed in his loft briefly because my actor, Bob Glaudini, knew him because he'd gone to whatever college in upstate New York Ray had taught at, and knew him. And so we stayed in his loft. And while this was after making Chameleon, and Bob apparently told him and his girlfriend of the time how I knew how to make films real cheap. And then the girlfriend said, will you come help Nick make a film before he dies? And I didn't have anything to do. And so I said, okay.
And
I
was
was
that
not a Nick Ray.
And that was the film that eventually became We Can't Go Home Again, the one with the multiple projectors.
No. That was done when he was at Binghamton or whatever the college he taught at. No, it was the Wim Wenders film.
Lightning Over Water.
Lightning Over Water, or Nick's film, whichever title you wanted. So I spent a month basically being his caretaker because he was dying from cancer. His caretaker and his gopher to go run get cigarettes for him while he'd go in the toilet, and his blood would be in the toilet because he was dying. He was deep into cancer, and anyway, that turned into a very unpleasant thing with Mr. Wim Wenders, whatever.
So you ran into Wim Wenders there, and you guys didn't get along?
I had run into Wim Wenders in the Bay Area when I made Chameleon, and he went to the Pacific Film Archive when I was screening it. I knew Tom Luddy, who ran Telluride and ran the Pacific Film Archive at the time, who knew Wenders because Wenders was there working for Coppola or whatever to make Hammett. And I have no idea how it was that, when I said, Tom, invite, I have no idea how it was that Wenders came to see a private screening, not a public screening, of Chameleon, claimed he liked it. And then I met him. So when the thing with Nick Ray happened, I knew that Wenders could get money from German TV. So I called him up, having met him, and said, okay. And I knew he was a friend of Ray's because Ray had been in The American Friend. And so I said, Nick wants to make a film before he dies. Can you get some money out of German TV or whatever? So he said, yes. That's how all that happened. And then I told, I was living in the loft with Ray, who was a very sick man, could hardly get out of bed, except to go to bleed into the bathroom. And then Wenders said, oh yeah, I can get the money. And then suddenly, because of Coppola had wanted his lead actor, I don't remember which reason it was, but anyway, it's like, okay, I'm gonna come. And so I called him and talked to him personally and said, look, Nick is a very sick man, and please come spend at least a week here before you start shooting. Well, Wenders started shooting the day he got there, and Nick was in the hospital a week later. And it wasn't, it wasn't just Wenders, but his crew moved into this loft. So they're like 4 or 5 people living in the loft and trying to shooting. And he was in the hospital 5 days later. And anyway, so a disgusting story.
Okay. I guess, do you have any more questions?
There is, I don't know if one can find it on Sight and Sound. There was, in the British Film Magazine, there was an article I wrote about it.
I may actually have, because I went to my mother's the other day. I picked up a bunch of stuff in my basement that I saved or in her basement that I put away before I moved. There's like a bunch of old film magazines with you and Mark Rappaport
Yeah.
showing up in them, so that might be in there. I'll have to take a look, but
It didn't tell that Mark and I are lovers.
well, it hadn't happened yet. This is the early 90s. You know, you guys, you got kind of like a Jennifer Lopez, Ben Affleck thing where you kind of had to repeat after 20 years, right? Yeah, so we told you an hour. I think it's been an hour, but Ron, do you have any final questions?
Well, I want to, going back to the movie, and we said about the ambiguity of what happened. Actually, Dan and I, after the movie ended, and asked, so did it happen? And neither of us was sure because it wasn't clear in the movie. Dan was leaning a little bit to it was a false recovered memory, just ever so slightly, and I was leaning just ever so slightly to maybe it happened, but it was the quote at the end. I think it was an Emerson quote.
Yep.
About liar. We both interpreted it differently too.
Yeah.
That Dan thought it was more about the daughter being the liar, and I thought it was about the dad being the liar. So again,
well, I thought it was about how like nobody could trust anybody, regardless of if anybody was lying, right? Like it's the general breakdown of like nobody in the society trusts each other.
Yep.
At that point, except for I guess Tom and Marshall. But I mean, everybody loves Marshall, right? Like, right? Because they don't really have a falling out. Just Marshall's kind of there in the beginning of the movie.
Mm.
But, how's Marshall doing, by the way? I haven't heard from him.
He sold his building in Walkerville, the one I stayed in, and sought coming to terms in. And he lives winter time in the Anza Borrego desert area in Southern California. And he should be probably back to Butte now, and he spends his summer and early autumn in Butte. And that's what he's doing. And anyway, regarding the film, as I say, I meant it to be neutral. I meant it not to tilt you either way, that you should be readable both ways.
Right.
And that's what I wanted. And so, as I say, it becomes a litmus test on you. The film doesn't give you the stuff. I think I put a very tiny light thumb on the side of don't believe her story.
Yeah, I mean, I came over, was like, I'm not sure, but so if I have to force an answer, it's like, but it was really hard to force an answer.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost, well, I was going to say shoot.
Well, at the time, it did just exactly what I thought. That people would project their prejudices into it, and I just had a very recent case here in Lisbon where somebody just told me that regarding the story about my daughter and whatever, that this woman told me that, well, always trust the woman first, right? Just always believe the woman first. I said, well, that's a fucked way of saying things. Just like always trust the men. Anyway, it's like, how about looking at the evidence? No, we can't be bothered with that. We have to do binary. It's him or her. Anyway, so it's a sad story, and I just had to do it. But in the bed you sleep in, I definitely was one of the, I don't know the story I'm telling. I don't know whatever, but one thing I'll know is something behind it. And in that case, I was definitely, with the bed you sleep in, I was definitely, okay, hot button topic of the time, which this is, it's not a hot button topic now, but back then it was. And, it was sort of like playing with this. I think I know which way people are going to go, even though I stayed totally neutral.
Right.
And,
yeah, I remember when, oh, sorry, go ahead.
My little litmus test proved back then to be correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I just showed it here, and I asked the audience, like, did he or didn't he? The answer was pretty much the same.
Oh, interesting.
It was still, yeah, he did it. for most of them, and then I point out there's no evidence he did it. How about, so I guess on that level, things haven't changed.
Mhm, mhm. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I remember when that was all going on, and that was a big deal. I mean, I think there was stuff on Oprah, right?
Yeah, sure.
About it. Yeah, it was everywhere.
Right. So I guess, do you have any final thoughts, stuff you want to plug? I mean, this is your.
Do I have
info,
any?
John.
Did you ask me, do I have any thoughts? Of course not. I'm
Well,
a Buddhist.
Okay. Well, I guess final thoughts, like stuff maybe that we didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about, or things you might want to clarify about other answers, or plug the VOD site.
I'm the world's worst businessman, so.
Well, we're trying to push you along here. Like, where do people find the VOD site?
Just do Jon Jost Films VOD, and I'm pretty certain it'll pull it up.
Okay. I think you have stuff on Vimeo.
That it's on Vimeo. Yes, all the VOD site is the Vimeo site.
Okay.
Now, presently missing my film about my daughter because they took it down because they were asked to by my former partner and allegedly by my daughter to take it down for invasion of, huh?
Passages or a different one?
Pequeños Milagros.
Okay.
Which is the film about my bringing up my daughter for 3.5 years. Beautiful film. Some people think it's one of my best films, but it had to be taken down because invasion of privacy of home movies. Anyway, so yeah, the VOD thing is my name, Vimeo VOD, and easily get it to you.
Right. Yeah, it was easy to find. So yeah. Quick Google search with your name and VOD brought it up.
Yep. Okay, guys.
Cool. All right. So this has
Thank
been
you.
Jon Jost, but he prefers that you call him JJ.
JJ, I do.
I'm kidding. No, this
I
is
think that's
Jon
JJ
Jost.
Murphy. Do you know who JJ Murphy is?
Not personally, no. I don't.
Well, he was a I suppose an experimental filmmaker who I happen to know personally. Made some very nice films. JJ Murphy. And then he faded from sight long ago. But he made some very lovely, wonderful films. Okay.
Well, if you see John on the street, call him the other JJ. We've been talking about the bed you sleep in.
There's at least several 100,000 JJs out there.
Right? Like you could completely hide away in anonymity.
I could hide away in the JJ anonymity. Because there's a lot of JJs. There's also a lot of MMs.
Yeah, and it's
Marilyn
a new
Monroe, Mickey Mantle, et cetera,
Marshall McLuhan.
Actually, MM is more an American something. There's something about MM in America that that's mystical. Mystical MM.
But there's only one Jon Jost.
No, there's another Jon Jost.
I'm certain there's several universes with other Jon Josts.
There's a Jon Jost who comes up like all the time on JSTOR, because I remember I was looking for academic papers on some of these movies when I was in college, and the Jon Jost,
he's an athletics guy, right? There's a Jon Jost who's something about athletics, but I don't know what, but.
There's a few of them, but only one of them made The Bed You Sleep In, which is the movie we talked about today.
Right.
It's in a nominee questionable movies. I'm still Dan.
And I'm still Ron.
And
somebody here is still John.
Well, no, now he's JJ.
Oh, now he's JJ. Right.
But
Right, well, thank you so much for coming on again.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thanks for coming on.
Take care, guys.
All right, take care, everyone.